We are going to talk about the introduction of project and project management. We are going to talk about the basic stuff, the very basics of the project and project management. And we will understand what are the factors that influence the project. So during this, from this point onwards, we will start talking about two different approaches. First is learning or understanding the topic from the examination perspective, and also get to know how we are going to use these principles and philosophies in the real life, because real life scenario is completely different than what we say in the book. Okay, so we are all good to move ahead with our agenda, and there we go. Introduction to project and project management. We will start with the very basics, and then we are going to get into some the level, the depth at which we are going to work, and we are going to discuss the things is going to decrease. So we will have an overview, we will have a high level view of it, but for that high level, it's important we understand the basics here. So the project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. This is the definition of project as given in Pmbok Guide 5th edition. This definition actually highlights the characteristics of a project. First is it has to be temporary. Second is unique, and third is a progressive elaboration. Temporary means it has to start one day and it has to end one day. It cannot be an ongoing effort. If it is an ongoing effort, then it is no longer a project, but it becomes an operations. And for operation, you cannot use your project management approach or project management methodology. You need to have methodology or the operations management procedure there. So this is one characteristic which will differentiate it from the operations. A lot of people come with this question that, I work in the operations, I work in the finance domain, I work in, let's say, bank, and all I'm doing some day-to-day activities. Does it make me eligible for the PMP examination? Now the question is, or the point that I tell them is, along with your regular operational work, you might have worked on certain projects as well. For example, if you are working in the finance operation, along with your operational goals and operational activity, if you have worked on any of the process improvement, any of the quality goal, any of the quality objective, if you worked on any Six Sigma or green belt or black belt project, if you worked on an initiative which was to bring down the operational cost, okay, that also can fall into the boundaries of project management, because you started that activity with a specific goal. It gave you a unique output. Let's say you received a goal, an objective from your management team that bring down the OPEX or operational cost by 20%. Okay, so the outcome of that entire cost optimization project is going to be 20% reduction in your OPEX, which is a unique output. And it, of course, is going to be time bound. It will start one day and it will end one day. So it becomes a temporary endeavor. And also, most importantly, it has progressive elaboration. So progressive elaboration is as you move ahead. Let me go to the paint so I can draw it there and I can explain it to you. So as you move ahead, you will see that the scope will increase, the number of activities that you're doing are increasing, and you get more clarity on what is to be done. You get more clarity on the scope. You get to move towards the finer details of the project. Okay, so that makes it, that is called as progressive elaboration. Okay, just a feedback I received that it was too long on how to apply for the examination. I understand, but that was the one of the topic where people actually have a lot of questions and a lot of doubt and a lot of misconceptions as well. I'm so sorry. I apologize if you feel it was too long, because some of the people in my previous session, they mentioned that it is actually they need more detail about the prerequisite. But later on, when you get the recording, you want to refresh anything, you can of course skip that part. But for the future sessions, we will definitely take in your point and we will consider that. Thanks for the feedback, Lenny. So we were talking about this progressive elaboration. So this is as you move ahead in the project, you get clarity about what is to be delivered. You get clarity on the final details of the project, and that is your project. So once you have a project ready, once you have identified a project, then you need to start managing the project. And for that, we will use project management, which is the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques applied to the project activities to meet the project requirements. So this definition is very important here. It says the application of knowledge. The knowledge, if I ask you what is the knowledge, so this knowledge is generally from the PMI perspective, it's not about the domain. If you are working in programming, if you do the coding, not necessarily you need to be a master of coding. If you work in construction, not necessary that you have to be a person who has done work in all aspects of the construction. But when we talk about the knowledge, we are actually emphasizing on the project management knowledge. The knowledge of the processes you need to use to manage that project. Okay? Talking about skills, so your managerial skills, your communication skills, your soft skills. And these skills are very, very crucial because as a project manager, you need to manage the project. And managing the project means managing the information or the work which is being done in the project. And for that, you need to interact with the people, your team member. You have your customer, you have your senior management running after your life because they want more to be done in less time. They want all the information as of yesterday. Your team is, of course, they have their own challenges. So these are all the stakeholders. And as a project manager, it is your responsibility to manage the expectations of the stakeholder and to manage the expectations of the different stakeholders. You need to have certain skills. Okay, so those are the skills which are very, very important. And in 5th edition of the Pmbok guide, PMI also has put a lot of emphasis on the competencies of the project manager. Okay. Along with this, a PM must be loaded with the tools and techniques. So tools are not just any spreadsheet in your Excel. The tools are the different activities also that you might do. You will be loaded or overloaded with the information. You need to use certain tools to be able to capture that information, to be able to create the repository of the information, and also to process that information and apply certain techniques so that you can use that information in your decision making. Okay. For example, if you are my boss, I'm sitting on my desk and working, and you come to me and ask me, Nishant, how much of the work is done? And if I tell you 50% of the work is done, does it make any sense to you? No. You need to know, because you need to know 50% in how much time, how much of the work was supposed to be done by now, and how much we have done. We should be able to do a comparison, isn't it? So 50% work done in isolation does not make any sense. So the correct way of telling this is, by this time we were supposed to complete 45% of the work, and I have completed 50% of the work. So whatever information you are getting from the different tools, you must apply, you must interpret that information in a useful information. That's the data, and you need to translate into information. And this, on top of everything, a project manager must also have some generic management skills and also the professional ethics. So PMI puts a lot of emphasis on the ethical part of it. So in the earlier versions of Pmbok, like until Pmbok guide, the 3rd edition, there was a separate knowledge area on professional responsibility and ethics. But from 4th edition onwards, they removed that knowledge area and integrated or added that to all the other knowledge areas that we have. Okay. Once you have identified the project, and you have started using your project management, then you need to understand that where exactly you are going to apply this knowledge, skills, and tools and techniques. And that is to ensure that all the competing factors of the project or the constraints of the project are in control. Okay, it's very, very important. It's very important to understand that where we are going to apply that, what are the different constraints that we have, and how we are going to manage those constraints. Okay, and it is a responsibility and duty of the project manager to balance among these constraints. And those constraints are your scope, time, cost, quality, resources, risk. One of the element gets disturbed or changes, it is going to impact your entire project. For example, if there is a minor change or deviation in scope, it is definitely going to increase your budget. It is definitely going to increase the time, your schedule. It may impact the quality. You may need some additional resources, and it may increase the risk. You make some changes to the schedule. Suppose you have a time overrun, your project got delayed, then of course your scope might get impacted. Your cost will definitely get a hit. Quality may get impacted. Resources may get impacted. Risk may get impacted. So as a project manager, you have to ensure always that you're getting a perfect triangle among your scope, time, cost, which is the key constraints of a project. But easier said than done. It's very easy to speak about those constraints and talk about this constraint that we need to manage this, we need to manage that. When it comes to real life situation, that is where all your knowledge and skills and capabilities are checked and tested. And project manager need to rely on certain tools and techniques and processes and also methodology. Okay. To have a good control on your project, first of all, you must understand the life cycle of the project. You need to have a very good visibility on the life cycle. Now, when we talk about the life cycle, we get two different terms for that: project life cycle or product life cycle. What is a project life cycle and what is a product life cycle? Product life cycle is a superset. Let me draw that here, and I hope my drawing skills will improve with time. Okay, so this is your starting of the program, let's say. Okay, for example, you work with a car manufacturing company. Okay, and your management team has decided that we are going to come up with a future car, and you, being a head of the R&D department, you have been asked to prepare a prototype with some state-of-the-art feature. Okay. So you set up a team, you finalize a project, and you start working on that project. And for that project, you actually, identify certain phases or certain stages of that. Let's say your R&D. Let me just type it here. Okay, your analysis, feasibility analysis, and then after some time you may want to do your design. Once you have identified that yes, it is feasible, you'll do the design, then you'll probably build the car, and then you'll do the testing of that, and then it will go for final approval. Okay, once it is approved, then that prototype will go into manufacturing. So the outcome of this project will lead into operations, and then you may have to do some operational activities there. You will have to start manufacturing that. It goes to the shop floor. When it goes to the shop floor, you follow the operations, because then it's just doing the mass production of the car. So let's say on the first year, your company decides to manufacture 5,000 units of that car. Second year, they decide to increase the capacity and the production, and they say we will manufacture 10,000 cars. third year, because the demand of the car may go very high. Company says, okay, we will manufacture 15,000 car, and after that the company says we may want to scale down the production, because at some point of time you need to phase out this car and come up with a new variant of that. Okay, so you can see here that two parallel activities are going on here. One is your operational activities, okay, and second will be your project activities. How come project gets into the picture here? So here, let me just write it down to make it clear. Operations, manufacturing operations, and then you may have some project as well. Now, how come project gets into the picture here? So in the first year, the capacity of that plant was to produce 5,000 units. And next year, the company decided to increase the production capacity or to double up the production capacity. For that enhancement, you need to do certain activities, certain work, which is time bound, which will have some unique output, and it also will have some progressive elaboration. Okay, so that is a project. Upgrading your manufacturing plant, enhancing your skills, enhancing your manufacturing capabilities will be a part of project. Will fall into the guidelines of the project, boundaries of the project. Operational activities will continue to work there. Let's say in the second year, company decides that, okay, so far we have been importing 90% of the components of this car from some other country. And in the second year, they decide to manufacture almost 50% of the components in-house. For that, the company again need to set up certain projects, that is designing of those components or maybe manufacturing of those components. So you can see operations and projects are going hand in hand at that area. Okay. And after some point of time, company decides to sunset this car. They said, okay, we are not going to manufacture any further models, but we will continue to provide support to the people who have purchased this car. So when we talk about the product life cycle is right from the let me just get hold of this. Production, the life cycle of the product, which is your car, started probably some early stage, even before that, because your company might have taken a decision based on the report or analysis that they did in terms of the market visibility and the requirement. So from that point till the time the car is being manufactured or is being supported, and until the time it is marked as end of life. So that from this point to this point, it is your product life cycle. Now within this product life cycle, within this span of time, there were multiple projects, might have been multiple projects. So let's say coming up with a prototype of the car was a project. Okay, upgrading your organization, your manufacturing plant, or setting up the manufacturing plant was a project. Cost optimization or automation can be a project in between. Increasing your capacity can be a project in this. So product life cycle is a superset, and there may be multiple project life cycle or operational life cycle within that product life cycle. Okay, so it's very, very important for you to understand the difference between your product life cycle and the project life cycle. An outcome of a project may lead into operations, and it may actually kickstart another project there. But that all will be a part of your parent, which is a product life cycle. Okay. So I hope this part is clear to everyone. If you have any questions, please feel free to type in your questions, and I will be glad and happy to answer those questions. Okay. When we talk about the project life cycle is, let's say I told you that this one is a project. From this point to this time is a project. And from the starting point till the end point, this project went through various stages. Okay. For example, we human being, we are born, and then we are kid, we grow up, we get into teenage, then we young, then we start going towards the midlife, and then we age, and then end of life, which is a universal fact and a fundamental truth. Okay, we also go through the different stages of life. Similar way, a project also has to go through the different stages of life, which is called as life cycle. So life cycle is made up of multiple phases, and those phases can be subjective. That phases may differ. The name of the phase may differ from the industry to industry, or the type of project that you're doing. So, you know, in a construction, you may have these kind of phases: your feasibility, planning and design, production. In pharma, you may have the discovery and screening of the any medicine, preclinical development, registration workup, post-submission activities. In IT, it's completely different. It's gathering, analysis, design, development, testing, and all. But these are the phases which you need to identify in your project. You must define the life cycle of your project, because once you have identified the life cycle, based on that you can decide what level of control you're going to exercise, what will mark completion of one phase, and you can move ahead in the project. So talking about the phases, more detailed into the phases, these phases will be interrelated, interconnected. They will definitely have some relationship among them. That relationship can be sequential, it can be overlapping, or it can be iterative as well. Okay. When we talk about a traditional waterfall approach, we use sequential, or we sometimes use overlapping as well. When we talk about agile, it is always iterative. Okay. You plan one phase, and based on the outcome of that one phase, you decide what should be the next phase, or what will be the deliverables of the activities of the next phase. Okay. So project phase is something very important to understand, because there may not be any direct question for it, but it will help you take some, or it will help you understand some of the complex questions in the PMP examination. Now let us talk about the factors influencing the projects. So from this point, you need to, we will go slightly to the higher level. Of course, we have only 5 hours, 4 hours, 45 minutes left, and we will not be able to cover everything. So I'm just going to touch upon certain topics which you must understand from the examination perspective, and we're also going to talk about the practical implications of that. So first of all, you must understand the influence that your organization may have on the project. When you start preparing for the PMP examination, when you read through the Pmbok, which I am going to take you through, you will see there are processes, and each process has some inputs. And in most, actually in all of the planning processes, one of the key input is OPA. That is your organizational process assets. Okay. Along with that, you will have some enterprise environmental factor, and there is one more thing which is not there in any process, but which is superficial across all the projects in the organization, and that is your culture, your organizational culture, and the style. Each organization, depending on the country they work in, depending on the industry, or irrespective of all those factors, they have certain culture, and that culture has a major and significant influence on the project that are being run in that organization. You must understand what kind of system you have, what kind of PMI is project management system, information system you're using. You must understand what are the style that organization follow, what kind of policies and procedures you have, what are the ethics and workers and the organizational structure and the shared value, belief and expectations. So from the entire set of factors which can have an influence on the project, we will talk about the organizational structure. Organization structure is important from the examination point of view, because there would be you can expect minimum 2 to 3 questions only from this topic, that is organizational structure. And in the real life as well, it becomes very important. Why? Let me explain you that. For example, you're working on a project, and you require, for your project work, for your decision making, you require some report from the quality analyst. Irrespective of the industry or the function you work in, I'm saying you are a project manager managing a project, and in your plan of activities, you had one activity that, you need to do a analysis of the quality or some other areas. You reach out to your quality analyst asking him for a report that I need it as per the schedule. You're supposed to give it to me today. So I want to see it by end of the day. And he responds you back saying, I'm sorry, I'm tied up with some other work which my boss has given to me. I will not be able to finish it before next week. And you have no option but to rely on or to accept this, or at the most what you can do is you can escalate this. You can go to his manager or her manager and you can discuss things with them. But whatever you do, this has impacted your schedule. You will not be able to complete or finish your work on time. Now think about it, why it has happened. Because the person who is supposed to give you that report is not under your direct control. It means as a project manager, your authority over the project resources is limited, isn't it? And that is because the type of organization you work into has not given you full authority or control over the project resources. Now, there is nothing right or wrong in that. You cannot say, no, this is wrong. I want full power, full authority. I am the project manager. But you will not decide what kind of power or authority you're going to get. That is decided by the type of structure your organization follows. Depending on the industry, depending on the work that your company does, depending on the certain other factors, it is decided that what structure they are going to follow, and this decision is taken at a very high level, leadership level. At the time of forming the organization also, they might have decided. So there are three high level or broad categories of the organizational types: your projectized organization, matrix organization, and functional organization. Within matrix organization, there are three subcategories: strong matrix, balanced matrix, and weak matrix. Each of the organization type decides or defines that how much authority project manager has over the project and the project resources. How much control project manager has over all the resources and the work that is being done. So before you start your project, before you start planning for the project, before you finalize the resources or the schedule, you must have a very clear visibility on what all resources are working or reporting directly to you. Do you have an authority to decide when they should do this project work, when they should not do this project work, or you don't have that? If you do not have that authority and control over the resources, find out who controls those resources. Okay? Because in that case, if you do not have that control over the resources, your authority is limited. So it means you don't work in a system where project manager has all the power. So looking at this picture which is on the right side of the screen, you can see depending on the type of organization, the authority of the project manager is increasing or decreasing. Projectized organization, project manager will be completely empowered and he will have full 100% authority to take any decision about the project. All the resources will be under his control or her control directly. Functional manager will have no authority in the projectized organization. Okay. But when we talk about the functional organization, the authority or the decision-making power for the project will be with the functional manager. So the similar example that I gave you, a quality analyst who has refused to do the work that you gave him today, he's saying that if you want this to be done, you need to talk to my manager. And that manager, quality manager, is actually a functional manager. If you go to product organization, most of the time in the product organization, you will see organizations are projectized. Project manager has all the power and authority. Who is working in his team, who is not working, when they are going to work, when they will do certain things. Okay, and all the resources will report directly to the project manager. But if you go to the services or if you go to the manufacturing organization, there it's most likely it is going to be a functional manager, or the authority will be with functional manager. For example, if you work in a manufacturing and you have a functional manager, you have operations manager, you have supply chain manager, and you have your finance manager. Company leadership, they decide that, okay, we are going to bring down the operational cost by 20% in, let's say, 1 quarter or 2 quarters. And they pass on this information to the senior management team or to the functional manager team. So each of the functional manager will probably identify one resource or a group of resources from their team who is going to work on the initiative to bring down the cost. But and if it is a cross-functional project, then your supply chain will pull out 1 or 2 resources, manufacturing will pull out 2 resources, finance will pull out 2 resources, and all 6 of them will be working on this project to bring down the cost. One of them can be identified as a person who will coordinate all the activities, who will probably collect all the data, present it to the function manager. Now that person is actually doing a coordinator's role. He will not, or that person will not have any power or any authority to take any decision. That authority lies with the functional manager. It means you are working in a weak matrix organization. In the balanced matrix, the authority and the power of the project manager will be shared. Okay, the authority will be shared between your project manager and the functional manager. In a strong matrix, project manager will have higher authority than the functional manager, and in the projectized organization, he will be the complete owner of the project. So this table shows you that in a different type of organization structure, what kind of authority project manager has, what kind of control he has on that. So you can see in the functional organization, project manager's authority is actually none. Okay, it may be very little or none. In weak matrix, it will move to limited. Balanced matrix from low to moderate. Strong matrix, moderate to high. And in projectized, it is high to almost total. Okay. So from the PMP examination perspective, you must understand that how it is going to impact your project values in terms of planning, in terms of execution, in terms of resources availability. Okay. In a real life, it actually has a very important impact and significant impact on your project. And I'm sure the example that I gave, you must have experienced that at some point of time in your professional life. So before you start a project in your organization, you first identify how much power or authority you have. You need to figure out what kind of organization you work into. Is it a projectized organization? Is it a matrix type of organization or a functional organization? Okay. I hope it is clear to everyone. Any questions? You can just type in your question in the chat window. Okay, thanks, Mike. I will consider no news as a good news. So no more questions. It means it is clear. So let's move on to the next factor, which is going to impact your, which will have an influence on your project, is a organizational process assets. So OPA, I'll call it as an OPA. So OPA is basically a collection of all your processes, policies, procedures, and knowledge base. When I say knowledge base, it means all the projects that you have done in the past, historical database, documentation available from those that historical projects, which you can use for this project. For example, you did a project which was delayed significantly, and this project was done in the organization by some other project manager, and there was a significant amount of delay, cost overrun in this project. Now, why it happened? That project must have documented some lessons learned. So you need to figure out what went wrong in that project so that you can take some preventive actions for your project. So the knowledge base becomes very important. It will also have a repository of all the policies and procedures and processes. When we talk about the processes, so processes are related to the methodology that the organization follows. And this methodology is owned by an entity in the organization. So let me do a check here. So can you please write the name of the entity which will own these processes, policies, procedure, and the knowledge base? Just take a minute. Shrikant, yes, fantastic. Rory, Shrikant, you, fantastic. It's PMO, Project Management Office, or some organization, they also call it as a Program Management Office. So your PMO will own your processes, policies, guidelines. A simple example, you join a new organization, you don't know how things move, and you have to kickstart a project. You go to your manager, and your manager says, you please connect with this gentleman or this lady from this team, and they will guide you. When you go and connect with that person, you get a whole list of documentation to be done, whole set of approvals that you require, and you need to follow certain process. So that person is most likely to be a PMO, Project Management Office or Program Management Office. And these OPA will have a significant impact on your project as well. For example, your previous project or one of the previous project was delayed because you had to procure something from a vendor and the vendor delayed the delivery of that material. So the project was delayed. So when you are planning for the new project, you will ensure that you have already clarified from this vendor that, no delay should happen, or why this delay happened, or you may also want to look for another vendor. So there is a question from Mike, which OPAs are owned by the PMO? Not all OPAs, correct? Yes, Mike, you're absolutely correct. Not everything or not 100% of the OPA will be owned by the PMO. I am talking about the key processes. For example, your methodology. Methodology says the moment you have to start a project, first of all, you need to fill up a charter document. So who is going to give you the charter document or the template for the charter is your PMO. Okay. There is a policy. So policy is not owned by the PMO, but PMO ensures that you are adhering to the policy. Policies are decided at the organization level. Okay. Management has decided that, okay, the policy is all the people are not supposed to spend more than 9 hours in the office. Some of the countries have very specific labor laws and they want to abide by the law. So the management has made a policy that no one is allowed to work for more than 9 hours in office. So PMO will ensure that the project hours that are being documented are in accordance with the policy. Okay. I hope I was able to make it clear, Mike. Okay. Thank you. And then there may be some practices or knowledge, some artifacts which can be used, which will have a significant influence on the project, and your completed schedule. We talked about that. Your risk data. Your organization may have a checklist depending on the industry you work on. For example, let's take an example of NASA. If NASA has to send a manned mission on Moon or in space, there is a very, very rigid risk management process which they need to follow. Okay. So project manager, we need to work with the compliance team. I'm not sure, I'm not familiar with the modus operandi of NASA, but of course there is a compliance team. There will be a compliance team who will own that risk data and who will ensure that you are following this checklist, you are following the correct steps to minimize the likelihood or probability of that risk. Okay. And as I told you, when we go to the process level, you will see that OPAs are an input to the most of the planning, actually not most, you can say all of the planning processes, because none of the planning can be done without referring to your OPA. So two high-level categories for OPA is your process and procedures and your corporate knowledge base. When we talk about execution or monitoring and controlling, some of the processes you will see updates to OPA as an element, as an item there. Updates to OPA, it means you are updating that data, the actual data in your knowledge base. Okay? You are archiving that information. Clear? So this is about OPA, and another important point that you must know about is here. Okay, so this is a visual depiction of your OPA or the corporate knowledge base, and the next point that we are going to talk about is your enterprise environmental factors. Enterprise environmental factors are again significantly important. You know, they are again input to the most of the processes, and they may include your culture, your structure, and the governance. For example, the same NASA. So NASA has a very, very stringent process, and they say that every component or every item that you are procuring from the vendor, from a third-party vendor, must go through a rigorous check, a process of check. So PMO is going to own that process. Okay, but that governance that you must have is based on the is decided by the organization as a senior management team. So as an organization, they need to have that strict governance in place. Okay. We talked about 9 hours policy, that the policy is that people should not be allowed to work more than 9 hours. Let's say 8 hours. Let's reduce it further. So that 8 hours is decided by the management team considering the local law, law of the land, law of the country. So that becomes an enterprise environmental factor. Okay, your market condition. If you have to submit a proposal for the new project and you are saying the return on investment or the margin of profit in this project is going to be 20%. So your board or your senior management will take a decision based on the guidelines of the organization, and the guidelines of the organization may say we will not undertake any project where margin of the profit is less than 25%. So your project may die at the charter stage only. Why? Because it did not comply with one of the enterprise environmental factor. And what was that factor? That was a factor which was in accordance with your market condition or your organizational, your governance or certain specific policies. Clear? So enterprise environmental factor will be there wherever you see planning process. EEF will definitely be there. In certain cases, when you go to the some processes of project HR management, you will see that in 2 processes you will see updates to enterprise environmental factor. So updates to enterprise environmental factor will happen when there are some changes need to be made in specific policies or the guidelines of the organization. For example, company may have a strict guideline that everyone need to work from 8 a.m. till 5 p.m. Now this project that you're working on requires a team member to interact with a customer which is in a completely different time zone. So a lot of people are working in the night and they are in the call with the customer till probably 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock, or they need to interact with them. So for them, it will not be possible to join the work report for the work at 8 o'clock. So for those cases, there may be an output that updates to your enterprise environmental factor. Okay. So whenever you see this is an output to your processes, you will see that only in 2 processes, you know what they are looking at. So with this, we actually cover the 3 elements here. And another important point that you must consider is the project stakeholder. This is a point which a lot of people I have seen in my experience, they miss. They fail to identify how stakeholders can impact their project. And that's why sometimes the project goes for a toss. So let us understand who is a stakeholder and who is not. Your project, any person, any individual or a group of individuals or organization who is actively involved in the project or who has the power to influence the project or may get influenced by the outcome of the project directly is a stakeholder. Your senior management is a stakeholder. Your project team is a stakeholder. Your vendor is a stakeholder. Okay, so these are all the people who can influence your project or who can get influenced by the outcome of your project. So let me ask you a question. You can write the answer of that in the chat window. I have a competitor. Shall I treat that as a stakeholder? Just say yes or no in the chat window. Can my competitor be a stakeholder? Okay, great. I can see most of the answers are no. Yes, in a standard project, it may not be a stakeholder. In PMP examination, you may get a question like that. But again, there is some amount of subjectivity involved into that. If I look at as per the general perspective, my competitor is not a stakeholder. Okay, but in certain cases, in certain specific projects, it can be. Let's say you are working on a government project and it's a huge project. So government decided to split that project into different pieces, and they assigned this project to 3 different companies. Yours is one of them, and all these 3 are actually competitors. So technically, that organization, other organization, is a competitor, but at the same time, in your project, it can be a stakeholder as well. So remember, whenever you have to answer this kind of question in the PMP examination, read the question thoroughly. And sometimes you may have to read between the lines as well. Okay, so from the PMP examination perspective, there may be some amount of subjectivity involved into that. In the general perspective, my competitor is not a stakeholder. Okay, your key stakeholder may include your PMO, customer, user, your seller, vendor, ops, or any person with whom you have some touch points in the project. And why I say that your stakeholder can influence your project is, let's say there is a compliance manager, or let me give you an example of quality manager. Okay, so you work in a matrix organization, balanced matrix organization, where you share your responsibility, or the project or the responsibility and the power is shared by the project manager and the functional manager. Quality manager is one of the functional manager. And one of the deliverable or your project is not complying with the company policy. Okay, it is well within the margin. Okay, but still quality manager says, no, I cannot give this approval to this project. I cannot pass this project. So that deliverable will be, you may have to do some rework. It means what? It means that person has power and authority to influence your project. And because he has now said, no, you cannot move ahead, and your project is getting a hit in terms of time, in terms of definitely cost as well. It means what? That you as a project manager missed identifying the influence of that person earlier, and you did not factor in to what extent it can influence or it can impact your project. If you had identified that this person is a major stakeholder, and if we do not comply to these and these standards, he will not approve the deliverable, and without approval, we will not be able to move ahead. Then you probably would have taken some actions and steps while the work is being done or while the work was being planned, that to end that, the output must be within these parameters or within these guidelines. Okay, so that's why your stakeholder identification is very important. I'll give you another very quick example. When you started your project, everything was fine, everything was hunky-dory, you started working on the project, and you are at the final stage of the project where you have done your deliverables are all ready and you're ready to hand over them to the customer. And at that time, you come to know from your management or from your leadership team or from your PMO that you must get an approval from your compliance manager. And when you go to the compliance manager in a jiffy, in an unplanned way, that person says, I'm sorry, I cannot give you approval until and unless you do these activities, give me the audit report. So now your project is getting a hit. Another example could be, okay, another example could be your let's say, senior vice president of the customer organization. He is a very senior person, and he said that he's going to review the project on a quarterly basis only. And during one of the review, certain factors he did not like, and he's saying, no, I'm not happy. Unless you clarify that, we cannot move ahead. Okay. So unless those points are clarified, you cannot move to the next stage of the project. And in that situation, you will have to probably go back and you'll have to do some corrections. You'll have to do some additional work. If you have identified that stakeholders in the early stage, and if you had noted down the expectation of that stakeholder in the early stage, it would have helped you plan or consider or include those factors or the additional work in your schedule as well. So there is a question here. Okay, so compliance manager in your, okay, Mike has a question. So compliance manager in this example will be a stakeholder. Compliance manager is just following the enterprise environmental factor. Okay, he is following a guideline which is set by the organization. And there is another question by Lian. Please let me know if I am pronouncing it correctly or not. So please explain the rotate log file. So rotate log file is basically your person, who is responsible to manage the log files probably. Your documentation or your archival requirements. That person can also be a stakeholder. So let me take it to link it with the compliance only. One of the guideline or enterprise, your environmental factor is that all the work, all the reports which are being generated, audit reports, project performance report, must be documented in your document management system. And you completed your project, you followed everything, but you failed to archive that or put that into your repository. So your log files might be missing from there. And when it comes to the compliance manager for the final approval, he will check whether these files are there or not. That person has maintained that documentation or not. It may, if it is not there, if it is not complying with that, he may reject it. Okay, so these are just the example. The list is not limited to this. There can be many more people or stakeholders beyond this as well. So with this, we move to the next topic, that is your understanding the processes and the project management framework. So please let me know if you have any questions from the previous topic that we covered. And there's a question from Stephanie. How can the customer be a project stakeholder? Isn't the project finished by the time the customer receives the product deliverable? Your customer is a major stakeholder. Okay. You are working on a project, and let's say it's a 6-month project, and customer has asked for a review every 15 days or every month. Now, customer is a stakeholder because he is the one who is going to get impacted by the outcome of this project. And he is the one who can actually impact your project or influence your project significantly or in a big way. So you must consider, you must note down the expectations of the customer. You must note down the expectation of all the stakeholders. You must validate those expectations, whether they are right, they are justified or not. And accordingly, you should make the plan. Accordingly, you should identify the deliverables or the project specifics so that those expectations can be met on time. What happens, otherwise what will happen is you started working on the project, you have the first customer review meeting, and during that review meeting, customer is not happy because he has some different set of expectation. So customer will say, I'm sorry, I cannot give you a go ahead on this. I'm sorry, I cannot release any additional fund for that. So he becomes a major stakeholder. Another question is, sorry, Stephanie, I hope I was able to answer the question. You can just confirm that in the chat window. Otherwise, I'll take it to the further detail. Okay, so Rory has a question. Is the PMO responsible for identifying the stakeholders in the organization? PMO can give you a standard list, but it is the project manager Who will have to define, who will have to identify? See, normally this work is done, this is a team effort, it's a teamwork. Team member, it's the responsibility of the project team to identify the stakeholder. And PMO, based on the policies, there would be some people who are fixed stakeholder, who is a permanent stakeholder in all the project that you do in the organization. Let's say compliance. Because of the policy that is there in the organization, every project must obtain an approval from the compliance manager. Then yes, your compliance manager will be a stakeholder. PMO will ensure that you are filling up the right document, you have the right templates available, and PMO will also ensure that you are obtaining the approval from the compliance manager. Okay, so it is the responsibility of the project manager and the project team to identify the stakeholder. There may be some stakeholders which will be subjective depending on the project. There may be some stakeholders which have to be a permanent stakeholder or a must stakeholder in all the project, and that is given by the PMO. But all those subjectivity is defined by the team itself.